Hey, this is Scott. My uncle just gave me his cutting board. It's in need of some major repair. It's got a big crack in it. While I'm at it, I'm gonna give it 5 major upgrades. Upgrades that you can do to your cutting board as well. My first plan was to use this vacuum to pull glue into the crack and then squeeze it together. I couldn't squeeze it together with a clamp, so I thought maybe there was some debris in there. After vacuuming, it was still the same. My only option left was to rip the cutting board and reglue it. I didn't make it full depth with the track saw in one pass, so the cut didn't end up as clean as I was hoping. I did end up running it through the jointer one time before gluing it back together. I didn't realize it earlier, but there's also a pretty good crack going through where the handle is cut. To fix this, I decided to use my crosscut sled and take a blade width out where the crack is. To fill that in, I ripped a thin piece of cherry and then planed it down to the thickness that I needed and then glued it in. Once again, I got out my trusty flush trim saw and flushed it up. I then glued the two halves of the cutting board back together. I could only find one video using a router table to make juice grooves. I used the jig from that video. I will link it in the description. A juice groove may not be needed for some smaller boards, but boards that will have large meats cut on them, a juice groove can be nice to keep the juices from spilling all over the counter. To use this jig on the router table to make juice grooves, you cut the distance on here about to where you want the bit to run. So we're gonna line the fence up to the bit so it hits right in this crease, which I have. I'm gonna slide it over to this corner and use a square. Leave the square here, move my cutting board in up against the square, and then I'm going to set my stop block just in line with the cutting board here. Tighten that down, and then do the same on the other side. Using this jig to set up the stop blocks, you really need to do it twice. You set them up and cut the long cuts, and then you set it up again to make the shorter cuts across the cutting board. The handles on this board were already cut. I just needed to enlarge them to make them even after doing the crack repair. Handles are great on larger boards as they can get pretty heavy. No one wants their dinner or Thanksgiving turkey on the ground for the family pets to consume. A juice reservoir can increase the holding capacity of what the grooves can handle. To make this juice reservoir, I made a template out of MDF. I ripped down a piece on my table saw and then used a hole saw to cut out a perfect circle, or kind of perfect. I started with a router bushing and a round nose bit to follow the template and cut the exterior. I then switched to a flat bottom bit to remove the rest of the material. To connect my freshly cut reservoir with my juice grooves, I wanted some straight lines. I used the edge of my router and a square to make that cut. I use this jig that I made to mark drill holes for the feet. The jig has 90-degree stops that go up against the corner of the board to evenly and easily mark hole locations. Feet are really nice to have on a cutting board. They allow airflow to consistently move under the board so that water doesn't get trapped between the board and the countertop. Water being trapped on the board surface like that for a long period of time will definitely cause problems. Engraving a cutting board can add a personalized touch. It can be really simple, like a name, or intricate, like a family crest. To engrave on the side of this cutting board, I looked around the shop and figured out I could use a rubber tub to put the board in, and I put some supports across the top to make the laser the correct distance from the edge of this board to get it engraved on that surface. A lot of the time cutting boards are finished with mineral oil and then a mix of beeswax and mineral oil, and that's what I've done here. This mix works really great for cutting boards or kitchen utensils. I wouldn't use it for furniture. The mineral oil never fully dries or cures, and it needs to be reapplied regularly, so it isn't a good option for furniture. To make this, I put beeswax and mineral oil in a measuring cup and then put it in a pot to slowly bring to a light boil. This will be enough to melt the mix without burning it. Cutting boards are fun to make and they make really great gifts. They can also be good for honing our skills as woodworkers. Check out this video I made a while back about making some cutting boards. Thanks for watching, and I hope your next board turns out amazing.